2018年冬季达沃斯论坛已经落幕1个月，而今年的论坛与往年相比多了几分意外性与话题性。举办地瑞士达沃斯小镇以10年不遇的大雪迎接与会者，出席论坛的外国政要人数创下新高，其中又属美国总统特朗普最为引人注目。论坛以在分化的世界中打造共同命运为主题，探讨当下严峻的全球不稳定形势。而中国作为维护全球化的重要旗帜之一，相关议题得到颇多关注。1月24日，由财新传媒与达沃斯论坛官方联合举办的财新辩论，作为每年达沃斯论坛重要的中国声音，如期拉开帷幕。今年辩论的主题为“一带一路”的全球影响，由财新国际董事总经理李欣主持，邀请到巴基斯坦总理沙希德·哈坎·阿巴西、新加坡总理公署部长陈振声、亚洲基础设施投资银行行长金立群、俄罗斯直接投资基金首席执行官、中俄投资基金联席首席执行官基里尔·德米特里耶夫、建筑工程顾问公司 AECOM 主席兼首席执行官迈克尔·伯克，以及中国机械工业集团有限公司董事长任宏斌，分别从政府、多边银行、投资机构、企业的视角出发，围绕“一带一路”倡议对区域和基础设施建设合作的影响展开讨论。
From its inception in 2013 to concrete efforts over the last few years, Belt and Road is enormous, covers more than 80 countries, and involves 40% of the world's GDP. And it's not just numbers, it's bridges, roads, facilities, sewage plants. It translated into real impacts of people's lives. And it's global in its reach and local in its impact. The initiative is hugely impactful and complex. Developing countries might ask, I want to participate, but can I pay for it? And Chinese SOEs, which leading many of the efforts, may also ask, I want to enter into these new markets, but which have been heavily penetrated by our Western counterparts. So should I collaborate or compete? And also for the small and medium-sized companies, they also want to ask, is this just for the big players, or what's in this for us? So with all this question in mind and more, we have an exceptionally qualified panel to discuss that with us today, and with viewpoints from the governments, the multinational development banks, funds, companies, Chinese companies, and international companies. Let's first start with the gentleman sitting on my right, Prime Minister Mr. Shahid Khan Abbasi. Pakistan has perhaps the most comprehensive implementation or collaboration on the BRI or the Belt and Road Initiative. How would you assess the local impacts?
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here. And we believe that the Belt and Road Initiative is perfectly in sync with the 2018 World Economic Forum meeting about creating a shared future in a fractured world. The BRI is indeed about creating a future amongst the participant countries. Pakistan is today perhaps the most visible part of the BRI, with the China-Pakistan economic corridor. But when we talk in terms of infrastructure, it is much more than that. Yeah. The BRI is a connection between a series of countries, regions, civilizations, and it's a link together to create a shared prosperity. In terms of defining the BRI, I would say that BRI is the physical manifestation of the bonds between countries that have existed through history. And this will cause a significant improvement in the lives of their citizens. The BRI will result in freer movement of people, goods, and ideas, and also result in a greater culture of openness between the countries. And we strongly recognize the vision and initiative by China and President Xi. What they've done is taken the linkages of yesterday, transposed them onto the fractures of today, and created connectivity for tomorrow. half of humanity lives in this region. So this is perhaps the best place to start working on the fractures and creating connectivity.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for putting that in a historical perspective and a very comprehensive view. And next, I want to hear from President of Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank, Mr. Jin Liqun. AIIB, as we know it, is really at the forefront of BRI, and you probably can help us answer one of the most frequently asked questions. Since its inception, how BRI has evolved in the last several years?
You see, we now have 84 members of our bank. So I would say most of the countries of our who are our members probably falling into the category of so-called BNI platform. So it is quite natural for AIIB to be doing a lot of infrastructure projects with the support of the member countries. We would be very much willing to consider any projects proposed by the member countries. But of course, we have to look at the basic requirements, whether these kind of projects proposed to us would merit the financial support. Basically, first criterion is financial sustainability. We should not do a project which would be loss-making. We will never do a project which would be a white elephant. The second is the support or improvement of the environment. We will be able to finance infrastructure projects without leaving a big footprint in the environment. Instead, we should be able to improve the environment when we promote infrastructure investment, and I can highlight that later on. The third is any project we do in any country, any area must be embraced by the local people. We will never ever do anything which would create problems for the local community. Thank you.
It's very important. Financial sustainability, environment impact, and the local support. We'll elaborate that later during our session. And the next, I want to turn the microphone to Minister Chan Chun-sing. Singapore is an important gateway to the belt side of the BRI projects. And it's not, what's your view from the perspective of the Singapore as a developed country, as a partner, and also as the financial and technology regional hub?
Singapore is very happy to participate in this project, and I think we have been working very closely with the Chinese agencies. According to one Chinese agency, they always remind us of this number, the 3385, which means that 33% of all the outbound investment under the BRI initiative comes through Singapore. And 85% of all the inbound investment to China also comes from Singapore. And the reason that Singapore is able to do this is because we are a financial hub. We are able to syndicate the loans together. So the role that we play will include how we can best help to syndicate the loans, how we provide the legal and financial support, the software aspect of this. And I think we are also closely working with the Chinese agencies to see how we can facilitate the training, the software transfer to the third countries. So I think there's tremendous opportunities for Singapore and China to work together to grow this project.
Thank you. And the next, Chairman of China National Machinery Industry Corp, or Sinomac as we know it, Mr. Ren Hongbin.
Yes.
So please share with us your perspective from Chinese SOEs.
At Sinomac, we have made the Belt and Road central of our international strategy. We have completed more than 1,200 projects, overseas projects, across all types of sectors. To date, we have completed or in the process of completing projects in 48 countries along the Belt and Road. And to maximize the returns to all stakeholders, we also collaborated with other leading companies like Siemens and GE along the Belt and Road countries. All working together, we will provide the more reliable access to those countries, the clean, secure, and affordable energy. So, however, working on cross-border projects can sometimes mean a challenge of miscommunication between parties. So I think we need to tell the stories of opportunities that the Belt and Road can provide to the everyday people. So the Belt and Road, I think, is more than just an infrastructure project. It is a crucial engine for building better and more socially inclusive tomorrow. So therefore, I think Belt and Road belongs to everyone. Thank you.
Thanks for sharing the very interesting number that you have 1,200 projects.
Yes,
48
overseas projects.
It's massive. And also you're echoing what Mr. Jing has highlighted, that you have to understand the local people's need and make sure you tell the stories right. And now we turn to Mr. Michael Burke from US. US is not part of the Belt and Road Initiative yet, but many US companies actually participating in this. So from your perspective, are you participating? And also, if yes, how do you think AECOM, that you are the CEO of, is benefited from BRI?
Sure, well, thank you for allowing me to participate. First of all, we are participating in the Belt Road Initiative in various degrees, but what it means to us and what it means to the region is quite significant. You mentioned the numbers, 80 countries involved, 40% of the GDP of the world touches the Belt and Road Initiative, but more importantly, almost 60% of the world's population falls in those few countries, and many of those countries are less developed and in need of significant development. And the Belt Road Initiative is, without a doubt, the largest infrastructure project in our lifetime. But what we recognize is the size and scale of that project cannot be done by any one country, and it cannot be done by the private sector alone or the public sector alone. It's going to require significant collaboration. And that is where AECOM has been involved in collaborating with the state-owned enterprises in various countries around the region to bring their expertise together with our private sector expertise to make sure that we're bringing the best ideas, the best techniques from a financing perspective and from a construction and design perspective to solve this incredible problem that we have, is the inability for goods to move freely around that region. But it is a project that has monumental significance in the region. AECOM has already been participating and collaborating, and we expect to participate for many years to come.
Thank you. You mentioned about collaboration, and we'll touch upon that later. And on the far end, but certainly not the least, Mr. Kirill Dmitriev, and the CEO of Russian Direct Investment Fund, Russia's sovereign wealth fund. So Russia is one of the largest countries along the belt, along the belt on the north. So from your perspective, how do you see international collaborations and how BRI is impacting Russia?
We feel that there are several very important layers of this implementation, because the key issue is execution. How can this be implemented? First layer, we feel, is partnerships between countries and also, for example, Eurasia Union, which is sort of partnership between Russia and some of its neighbors. And we believe that Eurasia Union can really be connected to One Belt, One Road initiative, and that's one level. The next level is institutions. And I think it's great that AIB is there, playing a very active role. We also created Russia-China Fund, which is our partnership with China Investment Corporation, partnership with China Development Bank to have renminbi, because we believe that renminbi is also an important part of the equation, and also our investments with Silk Road Fund. And the third layer are projects specifically in the areas of cooperation. And for example, with CIC, we are building the first ever Russia-China bridge. But it's broader than just bridges and railroads. We are also cooperating on technology. And we feel that technological connectivity is important. With Silk Road Fund, we invested in one of the technoparks in Russia. And connectivity between China and Europe through Russia of telecoms and maybe high-speed trains is also important. And the final point I'll make is sustainability of returns. Thank you.
Thank you. Very interesting point. Let's come back to Pakistan and use that as one concrete example to understand, once there is such a great need of infrastructure. And once we meet the need of infrastructure, what kind of power that will unleash?
Today, the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor is basically about infrastructure. We are putting in power plants, highways, railway is being modernized. We have ports are being modernized, airports are being created, and economic zones are being created for export growth. And the results have already started to come in. Our cement industry, there's 56% additional capacity being added. Our construction industry grew by 9.1% last year. Our exports are up 15%. So the knock-on effects are already there. And not only that, we are creating greater investor confidence, and there is a lot of investment coming outside the CPEC, where third countries have access to. So it's much more than the infrastructure that you see on the ground. And of course, the key principles are financial sustainability and lessening of the environmental impact.
Interesting. And another question is, for government-endorsed projects, it has many upsides, including the resource it can garner, including the support it can have. But also, people will try to avoid the white elephants that Mr. Jing has just mentioned. How to avoid white elephant in the BRI projects?
First of all, you have to try to find out why or how white elephants were created. And mostly, you will find white elephants were created with the public money. And this is normally the showcase of the politicians to show how great they are. They can do something wonderful. So give you a giant toy only for adults. So this is the problem. I'm not saying the private sector did not make these kind of mistakes, but normally the private sector people would see whether the money they put in would generate resources. I think it's very much important for us to have a broad consultation before the project is created. And if you do not engage the public sector, the private sector, the people, the stakeholders, shareholders, it would be very hard to prevent creating this kind of white elephants.
You mentioned about the engagement of the private sector, especially on the financing, especially on the broad consultation. So I want to turn that to Mr. Chan. And from your experience, how to engage the private sector, especially for the small and medium-sized companies?
Actually, in Singapore, we have done quite a number of projects with China over the many years. We had the Suzhou Industrial Park in the 1990s. Then we have the Tianjin Eco-City in the 2000s. And most recently, we have the Chongqing Connectivity Initiative, which I'm responsible for. In China, the development was rather unbalanced with a heavy emphasis on the coastal area. The question was, how can we unleash the potential of Western China, which has 2/3 the land area, but 1/3 the population? How can we bring down the logistic and financial costs to bring real benefits to the companies so that we can catalyze their development? So neither the Chinese government nor the Singapore government will be there to pick what we call the winners or the losers. We are there to provide the substrate to catalyze the industries to take place. And that's why we work very hard to make sure that we can bring down the financing costs and the logistic costs. And it was also on this basis, working closely with the private partnership, we started what we call the Southern Transport Corridor to open up a new strategic line of comms from Western China out to the South China Sea via a north-south route rather than the traditional east-west route that goes through the Changjiang, and which has the Three Gorges Dam as one of the choke points, and finally to Shanghai. And with that, we are able to drastically bring down the logistic costs.
Thank you. And now let's turn to the companies that are actually implementing these projects. And I want to ask Mr. Ren about it. You are involved in more than 1,000 projects around the world. Have Chinese companies' practices, how that improved throughout the years?
Well, when we talk about the practices, even sometimes we're talking about the standards, I think one thing is for sure, that is values will decide the success of a project. So let me take our collaboration with the local community in Lapland, Finland, as an example to answer this question. We are working together with the local community to create 8 innovative bioproducts. So our work will fully respect the unique biodiversity of the region. And this will help the local people contribute to national and European-wide development goals, including the EU's bioeconomy strategy. So our work here is not only about mitigating climate change. It is mainly about meeting the people's ever-growing needs for a better life. So implementing the Belt and the Road will go a long way towards creating more caring, more equal, and more human world. Thank you.
Thanks. And that understanding the local needs is part of the raised standard for your projects and investment overseas. And I want to turn this to Mike. Mr. Then elaborated on the positive side. And you invest and work extensively overseas as well. What are the common hurdles you will generally encounter, or you have to bear that in mind?
Listen, the hurdles are wide and varied in implementing infrastructure projects, and they range from the regulatory environments around environmental issues, around permitting, around taxation, bringing all the local stakeholders together. All of these obstacles are present in so many varied forms in so many different countries. And one of the great fortunes that we have had is AECOM operates on projects in 150 countries. And so we've seen enough of these obstacles and are prepared to deal with many of them. And so what we have found is that collaborating with the state-owned enterprises, and we work together with state-owned enterprises on projects all around the world, and many of them have extraordinary capabilities of building infrastructure projects in their own countries, but when they go into a new country, they need some collaboration and some partnering from organizations like ours that maybe have dealt with some of these before. And so it's that collaboration, and to the point that you made earlier, of bringing the private sector together so that we are knowledge sharing and bringing the best practices together is going to help us implement more of these projects through the Belt and Road Initiative.
Thank you. Let me just quickly ask one question before I open up the floor. Protectionism, because in Davos here, we talk a lot about protectionism. Currently, most of the BRI projects are still in the developing countries. But eventually, that will move into the developed world. Is protectionism your concern, Mr. Jing?
Protectionism is a kind of reality you have to live with. But I think when we promote the connectivity projects, infrastructure projects, which can bring people together with a shared benefit, I think there will be less and less market for protectionism. So sometimes if the benefits of the globalized economy, the benefits of this connectivity, integrated economy is not shared equitably, protectionism would raise its ugly head. So we are very much careful about the impact of the infrastructure projects, which will be good for not just the developing countries in the Belt Road area, but also for the major developed countries. Give you one example. For instance, when we are promoting the connectivity projects in Eurasia, bringing Europe and Asia together, creating a huge market for many companies in European countries. This is also very much good for the American companies. I see, even though the United States is not a member of our bank, we still engage in American financial institutions and manufacturing. So Belt Road Initiative and also the investment done by the multilateral development institutions. We co-finance with the World Bank, we co-finance with ADB. All this would create a huge market. So this, in my view, is likely to ease the concerns on the part of some of the people. But I want to highlight one point. Please look at the connectivity projects as a public good. It's not simply a project for your own country. And if you design a project, a road, a railway, a port, as a global public good, that would cut the costs of shipping, transportation, transaction. This is good for everybody. So in this regard, regulatory coordination, macro policy coordination is very much important. So as long as we can go forward along this line, we can maximize the positive externality involving all of the participating countries. I believe in the next stage of globalized economy and regional and global cooperation, we should pay more attention to share the benefits as President Xi highlighted. And that, I would say, probably would ease the concern of some of the people and would mitigate the concerns of some people who are worried about their own benefit. So it's very much important, as I said, highlight this point. We are building public goods and public services. We need regulatory coordination, thereby enhancing shared benefits.